Imagine raising rabbits and you never, ever have to go to a feed store.
Whoa.
That's what we're diving into today.
Really?
Yeah, we're using this video, and it's all about feeding rabbits off-grid.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fascinating idea, especially if you're, into that whole self-sufficiency, resilience kind of thing.
Yeah, it really makes you think differently about, like, raising animals,
Yeah.
Instead of just, like, automatically going to the feed store, relying on that. This video shows you how to make this system where the rabbits are basically, like, helping to grow their own food.
Exactly. And it jumps right into, like, debunking this myth that everyone's always talking about, the hay versus pellets thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one's good, one's bad.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack that whole thing and get to, like, what rabbits actually need.
Well, the truth is they can both be part of a healthy diet, right? Hay and pellets. The key is understanding what the rabbit needs nutritionally and then balancing their feed, accordingly. Think of it like they both have their pros and cons, right? Pellets are convenient, but they often come with this, like, convenience tax.
Oh, yeah.
They could be more expensive. They might have fillers and stuff in them. Hay, on the other hand, is closer to their natural diet, but, it requires a little bit more effort to source and manage.
So it's about, like, making informed choices and kind of tailoring it to your own situation.
Right.
But before we even get into, like, specifics about different diets, let's talk about, like, the actual building blocks. Like, what does a rabbit need to thrive?
Okay, well, just like us, they need a balance of carbohydrates, fiber, fats, protein, all the vitamins and minerals. Carbs give them energy, and that fiber is crucial for their very specific digestive system.
Now, I know fiber is important for digestion, but can you kind of explain why rabbits need so much of it? Like, why is it so important?
Absolutely. They have this special digestive system. It relies on something called psychotrophy. Psychotrophy.
Okay.
So basically, they make two types of droppings,
Yeah.
right? You have the first type, which is the hard round pellets. That's what you typically see.
Right.
The second type are called psychotropes. And these are softer, they're more nutrient-rich, and the rabbit re-ingests them.
Really?
Yeah, and guess what plays a key role in making those psychotropes?
I'm gonna guess fiber.
Fiber. You got it. So it's really essential for that whole process.
Yeah.
And if they don't have enough fiber, their system can get all out of whack, lead to some health problems.
So fiber is a VIP in the rabbit world.
Yeah.
What about the other essential nutrients? Like you mentioned fats, protein.
Right. Well, the fats are really important for nutrient absorption and just their overall health. Now, you might think of, like, seeds and nuts as good sources of fat, and they are.
Right.
But this video highlights something kind of interesting. Even grains like oats and wheat, barley, can actually contribute to a rabbit's fat intake.
Which makes sense because, in the wild, they would be eating those things.
Exactly. Now let's talk protein. It's essential for growth, especially when they're young, and it helps to support a healthy immune system. And alfalfa hay is a great source of protein, but it's also high in calcium.
Oh, that's right. And too much calcium can be a problem, especially for the males, for the bucks.
Yes. For bucks, it's really important to, like, balance that alfalfa with other types of hay to avoid potential urinary tract issues.
Yeah.
The video gets into, like, the specific hay varieties in, what they offer nutritionally. That can be really helpful to, like, fine-tune your rabbit's diet.
So it's not just about throwing any old hay in there.
Right, exactly.
You really have to understand the different types.
And their impact.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, like choosing the right fuel for your car. You want to make sure you're giving it what it needs.
That's a great analogy.
To run well.
Yeah, and just like with cars, there's these myths and misconceptions about rabbit nutrition.
Oh,
right?
sure.
Like, some people worry about protein poisoning.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
But the video actually debunks that.
What's the truth behind protein poisoning?
Well, it is a real condition, but it's not something that you typically need to worry about with domestic rabbits. It usually happens in herbivores that are suddenly switched to a high-protein diet.
Okay.
Which, if you're managing their feed properly, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
So it's another myth busted. But speaking of managing feed, the video introduces this really cool concept called the rabbit tractor.
A rabbit tractor.
Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've never heard of a rabbit tractor.
Oh, it's a fantastic way to give them fresh forage.
Yeah.
And reduce your reliance on, like, stored hay, especially in those warmer months.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's this movable pen, and you put it on, like, a patch of grass or weeds,
Okay.
and the rabbits can just graze.
So it's like a portable salad bar for your rabbits.
Exactly.
But I imagine there's, like, things you have to think about when it comes to a rabbit tractor, right? Like making sure they've got shade, protection.
Of course, yeah. Safety and well-being are super important. So the video stresses things like, making sure the fencing is secure. You're protecting them from predators,
Yeah.
giving them enough shade and water, and, rotating the tractor regularly so they're not overgrazing and the vegetation has a chance to recover.
So it's all about working with nature, not against it.
Right.
And I like how the video also addresses that whole misconception that you can just release domestic rabbits into the wild and they'll be fine.
Right, yeah. Domestic rabbits are not the same as wild rabbits.
Right.
They've been bred for different traits. They don't have those instincts they need to survive.
To be out in the wild.
Releasing them is basically a death sentence.
So it's important to remember that they are domesticated. Like, they rely on us to care for them.
Speaking of care, let's actually get into the specifics of, feeding them off grid.
Yeah.
The video explores two main approaches: the forage-only diet and then the combination of foraging grains.
Okay.
Let's start with the forage-only option. What are the key takeaways there?
Well, the video talks about how efficient this method is, right? It says that you could feed a buck 3 does and their offspring for a whole year on just 3 bales of hay.
Wow, that's impressive. And remember, that's based on average hay yields.
Right.
If you're doing things right, with fertilizing and managing it properly, you could potentially double your yield.
Oh, wow.
So you'd need even less land.
So for someone who's limited on space, it seems like that forage-only method, especially with the rabbit tractor, seems very doable.
Absolutely.
But I am curious about the grain and forage diet.
Yeah.
What are the advantages there?
That's where things get interesting. So the video breaks down this sample diet. It's 50% forage, 50% grains, specifically corn, wheat, barley, and oats. But it emphasizes that, you can adjust that ratio based on what's available where you live. So if soybeans are more common in your area, you could swap those in.
So you're working with what your local ecosystem is providing.
Exactly.
But I have to say, the thought of growing all that grain, corn, wheat, barley, it can be kind of overwhelming.
I hear you. It's definitely an undertaking. But the video really breaks it down into these manageable steps, right? It covers everything from choosing the right varieties for your climate to planting, harvesting, storing.
And don't forget the magic of seed saving.
Ah, yes.
That seems like such a game changer here.
Seed saving is unlocking a superpower for your homestead. Not only does it save you money, but you're also adapting those plants to your specific climate, your soil, over time.
That's so cool.
Each generation is going to be better suited to your little environment there.
It's like custom designed food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you combine that with the forage from your rabbit tractor,
Yeah.
you're well on your way to a closed loop system where your rabbits are basically helping you grow their own food.
Now, speaking of closing the loop, we can't forget about the other end of the rabbit.
Right.
We talked about what goes in, but what about what comes out?
Yeah.
Rabbit manure is gardener's gold, right?
That's what they call it.
And the video really gets into why.
Well, rabbit manure is an absolute powerhouse of nutrients, right? It's higher in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium than cow manure, horse manure, even chicken manure.
Wow.
And here's the best part. You can use it directly on your garden. You don't even have to compost it.
So it's not only are the rabbits providing food, but they're also helping to fertilize the plants that are feeding them.
It's a beautiful cycle.
It is. It really is.
The video even calculates that, if you have a well-managed rabbit operation, the amount of manure they produce could fertilize all the land needed to actually grow their food.
So you're really closing the loop there. 100%.
Now, when it comes to cost, I'm curious, how do these off-grid methods compare to just buying commercial feed?
Well, good question. Well, the video breaks down the costs for both approaches, the forage-only and the grain and forage. And the forage-only one, especially when you have that rabbit tractor, really keeps your costs down. It pretty much comes down to just your labor, which is a valuable resource. But
In terms of financial outlay, it's pretty amazing, especially with how expensive feed has gotten.
for sure. Now, the grain and forage diet does require some initial investment, right, for the seeds and the equipment for growing and processing the grain. But as we said, seed saving can really help with that over time.
Right. And when you consider the long-term benefits, you're building soil fertility, you're relying less on outside inputs, that grain and forage method seems really appealing.
Totally.
But beyond the practicalities, beyond the cost, there's something deeper here.
Yeah.
The video kind of hints at this idea that raising rabbits off-grid, it's about more than just food. It's about a way of life. You hit the nail on the head as a connection to nature, right? It's about that self-sufficiency, that resilience, especially in a world that's, kind of uncertain right now.
It's about taking control, right, of your food chain, not being reliant on these big systems, which, you know, could be good if things ever get disrupted.
Exactly. And it goes hand in hand with, like, understanding how those natural systems work. So instead of just relying on industrial methods, you're working with nature's cycles, seeing how everything connects.
And for some people, it might be about knowing exactly what's going into their food. You know, like raising animals ethically, thinking about their impact on the environment, their footprint. Those are all values that come into play.
Absolutely. And there's this real sense of empowerment that comes with that knowledge, right? It's not just about the rabbits. It's about realizing you can actually create these systems yourself, you know, in your own backyard.
It's about putting your actions, like where your beliefs are, right?
Yeah.
Living in a way that reflects your values, and that's a pretty powerful thing.
For sure. It shifts your perspective.
Right.
From just buying food to understanding that whole process, the care that goes into it, the health of the soil, you know, the sustainability of the whole practice. It all matters.
And those benefits, they don't just stop with you, right?
No.
They ripple outward. They impact your community, the environment, your own sense of self-reliance.
Totally.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up this first part of our deep dive into off-grid rabbit raising, we hope you're not just walking away with information. Like, we hope you're actually feeling inspired to maybe think a little differently about your food choices. Even just explore what self-sufficiency could look like for you.
Because ultimately, it's about more than just the how, right? It's about understanding the why behind raising your own food.
Exactly. Okay, so let's get into some of the details about that forage-only approach.
Yeah.
You know, using the rabbit tractor and all that.
Yeah.
The video gives some actual numbers about like how much space you'd need, which I thought was really helpful.
Yeah.
It says that for a buck, 3 does and their kits, you'd probably need somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of an acre.
Okay.
To grow enough forage to feed them for a year.
That's actually like less land than I would have guessed.
Yeah.
And I remember the video mentioned that like the rabbit tractor actually helps reduce that space even more because you're kind of like doing more targeted grazing.
Absolutely. You're moving it around strategically. So you're giving those rabbits fresh forage, but you're also giving the other areas a chance to, you know, rest and recover. So it helps maximize your land use, but also keeps your pasture healthy.
It's a win-win for everyone, the rabbits and the land.
Exactly.
But I do want to circle back to that other approach we talked about, the grain and forage diet.
Oh yeah, the grain and forage. That's where things get really interesting. So remember, the video outlines that sample diet, right? It's like 50% forage, 50% grains. They specifically talk about using corn, wheat, barley, and oats for the grain portion.
Right.
But they make it clear that, you know, you can adjust this based on what grows well in your area. Like if you've got a spot where soybeans just thrive, you could totally swap those in for one of the other grains.
So you really are working with what your local ecosystem provides.
Exactly.
I have to say, though, thinking about growing all that grain myself, the corn, the wheat, the barley, it can feel a little overwhelming.
I get it. It's definitely an undertaking. But the video does a good job of breaking it down into manageable steps. They talk about like selecting the right varieties for your climate, and then the whole process of planting, harvesting, storing the grain.
And of course, we can't forget about the whole seed saving thing.
Oh, the seed saving. Yes. That's like crucial to this whole system.
It's a game changer.
It is. It really is. It's like you're not just saving money, but you're also adapting those grains to your specific climate and soil conditions over time. So each generation is going to be even better suited to your environment.
It's incredible. It's like, you know, having custom designed food for your rabbits.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, combining that seed saving with the forage you're getting from the rabbit tractor, you're really on your way to creating that closed loop system. The rabbits are essentially helping grow their own food.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it that way.
It is.
Now, speaking of closing the loop, we have to talk about the other end of the rabbit, right?
Right.
We've talked about all the stuff that goes in.
Yeah. What goes in?
But what about what comes out?
The other end.
Rabbit manure, right. Gardener's gold, as they call it.
That's right. The video really gets into why it's so valuable.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, rabbit manure is like a powerhouse of nutrients. Seriously. It's got more nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium than cow manure, horse manure, even chicken manure.
Really? It's that much better.
It's amazing. And here's the best part. You can use it directly on your garden. You don't even have to compost it first.
Wow, that's a huge time saver. So it's like the rabbits are not only providing a source of meat, but they're also helping to fertilize the very plants that feed them. It's this beautiful, sustainable cycle.
It really is. It's amazing. The video even did some calculations and found that, like, if you've got a well-managed rabbit operation, the amount of manure they produce could potentially fertilize all the land you need to grow their food.
So you're literally closing the loop there.
100%.
Now, I do have to ask about the cost, How do these off-grid methods actually compare to just buying commercial feed? Does the video give any insight on that?
Oh yeah, they do a great job of breaking down the costs for both approaches, the forage-only and the grain and forage. And that forage-only method, especially if you're using the rabbit tractor, it really minimizes your expenses. Basically, it comes down to the cost of your labor, which is valuable. But
in terms of actual money you have to spend, it's pretty incredible, especially considering how expensive feed has gotten.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, with the grain and forage diet, there is some initial investment, for the seeds and any equipment you might need for growing and processing the grain. But remember, seed saving can really help reduce those costs over time.
Right, and when you think about those long-term benefits, like you're building soil fertility, you're not as reliant on buying stuff from outside sources, that grain and forage approach becomes even more appealing.
Definitely.
But it's not just about the practical stuff, the cost savings. There's something, deeper here.
Yeah.
The video kind of touches on this idea that raising rabbits off-grid, it's about more than just food. It's about a way of life,
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's about that connection to nature. It's about self-sufficiency, that resilience, especially in a world that feels, a little uncertain these days.
It's about taking control.
Yeah.
Taking control of your food chain, not being so reliant on these big systems, which could be really important if, things ever get disrupted.
Absolutely. And it goes hand in hand with understanding how those natural systems work. So instead of relying on those industrial methods, you're working with nature, you're seeing how everything's connected.
And for some people, it might be about knowing exactly what's going into their food, raising their animals ethically, thinking about their environmental footprint. Those are all values that come into play, too.
They do. And there's a real sense of empowerment that comes with that knowledge.
Yeah.
It's not just about the rabbits. It's about realizing you can actually create these systems yourself, in your own backyard.
Right. It's about putting your actions where your beliefs are, living in a way that really reflects your values. And that's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. It really shifts your perspective. You're not just buying food at the store. You're thinking about the whole process, the care of the animals, the health of the soil, the sustainability of the entire practice. It all matters.
And those benefits, they don't just stop with you.
No, they don't.
They ripple outward. It impacts your community, the environment, your own sense of self-reliance.
It's a ripple effect.
But before we get too philosophical here, I do want to circle back to one more practical point that the video emphasizes. The importance of making sure rabbits have access to food, like all the time.
Oh yeah, this is crucial. Their digestive system is designed for continuous grazing. They're not like us. We can go hours between meals. Rabbits need to nibble constantly throughout the day.
Why is that? What's going on with their digestive system?
Well, their stomachs are constantly producing acid, whether there's food in there or not.
Oh, so if their stomach is empty for too long, that acid could start to irritate their stomach lining.
Exactly. It can cause them discomfort, even pain. And because they're prey animals, they tend to hide signs of illness or discomfort. So we have to be really proactive about making sure they always have something to munch on.
Okay, so whether it's hay, fresh forage from the rabbit tractor, or that balanced mix of grains and greens, the key is keeping those bunny bellies happy.
Absolutely. It's not just about meeting their nutritional needs. It's about ensuring their overall well-being and preventing those potential health problems.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Everything from the specifics of rabbit nutrition, to those off-grid feeding strategies, to the bigger picture of self-sufficiency and sustainability. But as we move into the final part of our conversation, I think it's important to leave our listener with something to ponder. So we've talked about all the practical stuff, the how-tos of raising rabbits off-grid. But what about the bigger picture? Why would someone even choose this path? Why not just go buy rabbit food at the store?
Right. It's a good question. I think the video kind of hints at some pretty powerful reasons. That desire for more self-sufficiency, that connection to nature, maybe even a sense of responsibility for where our food comes from.
Yeah, taking control of your food chain, right? Not being so reliant on these big systems, which could be really valuable if things ever get disrupted, like supply chain problems or something.
Exactly. And it goes hand in hand with understanding how those natural systems work. Instead of relying on those industrial methods, you're like working with nature. You see how everything connects.
And for some people, it might be about knowing exactly what's in their food, like raising animals ethically, thinking about their environmental footprint. Those are values that come into play too, right?
For sure. And there's this real sense of empowerment that comes with that knowledge. Like, it's not just about rabbits, it's about realizing you can create these sustainable systems yourself in your own backyard.
It's about like aligning your actions with your beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Living in a way that reflects your values, and that's pretty powerful.
It is. It really shifts your whole perspective. You go from just buying food to understanding the whole process, the care of the animals, the health of the soil, the sustainability of the practice. It all matters.
And those benefits, they don't just stop with you, they like ripple outwards, impact your community, the environment, your own sense of self-reliance.
It's a ripple effect.
It really is. Well, we've explored a lot in this deep dive. Everything from the nitty-gritty of rabbit nutrition, to those off-grid feeding methods, to the bigger questions of self-sufficiency and sustainability. And as we wrap up, we hope you're not just walking away with information. We hope you're feeling like inspired, maybe to think differently about your own food choices, or even just explore what self-sufficiency could look like for you.
Because in the end, it's about more than just the how-to, right? It's about understanding the why behind raising your own food.
Food for thought. Until next time.